Groovy. Go here. Switch account. B. Oh. Hey, Alan. Ah. Go here and slowly do just one thing. Now, while you're here, copy these letters. Now go here and paste. And now go here and copy. All you have to do is copy, copy, copy. Now go here. Now, okay. Virtual, whoever you are.
Yeah, that would be me. Boy, oh boy, that would be me. And that's a good lesson. It's a very good.
Hey, John David.
Oh, hello, Nina.
Yeah.
Oh, we have people. I'll mask up.
No, those people are just Alan.
I'm going to put myself in this.
Hey, Dina.
Good morning.
Good morning. Too many controls.
I heard it was very cold in Hawaii.
Yes, we have some north winds coming through.
What does define cold?
Well, when there's no heat in the house, 58 can feel kind of cold.
Okay. I agree.
Your house doesn't have
Our
heat.
high yesterday.
Yeah.
Your house has no furnace.
No, there's no furnaces.
AC?
All over.
We don't believe in AC, but some people have.
Me neither.
I don't have air conditioning. I have an older house and there's really no need for it.
We're also in our virtue. This is great.
I see a rabbinic head at the top of the screen, bottom of the screen.
Half a head.
And Arnevet. The Arnevet is coming.
I'm just trying to put my laptop in because I have some stuff I want to show everybody.
Oh,
Here we go.
let's see, am I working? I'm working. Well, let's put this
Yes, there you have it.
up a little.
Let you in soon. That seems to be me.
Dana, how long have you been in Hawaii? Are you a long time here?
Not 92.
I see. Okay, you're
Yeah.
serious. You're
Yeah, well,
you're committed.
I met my husband out here and he has family here. So
I see. Where are you from?
I'm originally from South Jersey, near
Oh,
Philly.
okay. Me
Yeah, if you
too.
listen carefully, you
Me
hear it in my
too.
vowels.
Me too. Logan, you know Logan,
I've heard of it, yes. Yeah.
Cherry Hill and all that. You're
Yeah, Cherry Hill, absolutely. Cherry Hill's right down the road. I'm Willingboro.
Okay.
Yeah. Home of
All right.
Carl Lewis, the famous Olympic sprinter.
Oh,
B.
one of my-
Was he the guy who demonstrated somewhere or someplace?
I don't think so. Yeah, he and his sister were both in the Olympics. He was much more successful than she, but yeah.
1936 Olympics, right?
No,
In-
no, no. This is
Germany?
way,
Oh, it's
yeah,
different one.
that's the protest time. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
I got out in 1960, when 1963, I escaped from from Philadelphia. Okay.
so you're not a Sixers fan anymore, huh?
No. Well, what happened was I'm not much of a sports fan, and I discovered that the A's had moved to Kansas City. Okay. I was in Chicago, and then I moved out here and I discovered they were following me. It was very embarrassing. They're going to
They
get to
wanted you-
Hawaii eventually, I assume.
They wanted you to be their manager
Yeah.
or their stats guy.
Right.
Is haunting you there, Alan. Connie Mack is haunting you.
Yeah, I told you I shook Connie Mack's hand, the old man.
I remember.
Alan, I weirdly had that happen with one of my rabbis. I graduated from high school and I went to Wesleyan. So I went 3,000 miles away. And my rabbi from Foster City, I kid you not, followed me to Middletown, Connecticut and ended up as the rabbi of the synagogue there.
Oh, that's unbelievable.
He decided you needed spiritual guidance.
You know, at the time, I just thought it was odd, but then with Carol's own journey, it ended up being perfect because he was actually instrumental in helping
How nice.
Carol become Jewish.
How nice.
For sure, baby, for sure.
Yeah, I kid you not, actually, she's going to all this Jewish stuff. She's into it. She's learning and she goes to the rabbi in town basically it's like, I'm confused. I don't even know what to do. And the rabbi says, so now that you're thinking about converting, and she's like, wait a minute, could you just back up to that word? Like she had no idea it was one of the choices. I mean, she literally didn't know that one could become Jewish.
You don't advertise well.
It was good. It's a well-kept secret. Yeah.
I guess you can't become Hindu. You can't,
I mean, you
cannot
would
become
think as good
Hindu.
as Jews are at PR in the general world, we could like bring a little bit,
I
right?
was shocked.
All right, boys and girls, it's good to see you all.
So David, what's your favorite line when to discourage someone who comes to you wanting to convert?
I'm super bad at that, Jeff.
No.
I feel like, in all seriousness, like I feel that the world does a plenty good job on its own discouraging people from any sort of religious engagement, let alone being Jewish. And they don't have the cultural context to understand the three refusals. Like people just interpret that as being mean instead of understanding that it's meant as a test of seriousness.
That's true.
Yeah. So I'm just welcoming.
You ever explain it? You
Yeah.
ever explain the traditional?
I always tell people that there's that practice and that I don't do it and why I don't do it.
No.
All right. So what I'd like to do today is I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about Hanukkah, since it is indeed the seventh day of Hanukkah. And look, I brought my Hanukkah. I didn't really, to be totally honest, I didn't bring the Hanukkah just for you. I brought it more for the Intro to Judaism class.
That's an
It's a
interesting
fun
one.
one, right?
Well, now I.
But here it is. I have it. So what I wanted to talk about is I wanted to look at a few sources that look at questions of Hanukkah and ask ourselves the Talmud's question throughout, which is my Hanukkah. In other words, according to each source,
For was nicht.
in other words, according to each source, Alan, it's actually occurring to me on my sabbatical to spend some time studying Yiddish, but we'll see. It turns out Duolingo has Yiddish.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a big controversy as to what symbol they were going to use.
Oh, really? What did they end up? I didn't even notice that.
They use an aleph, I believe. But there were.
What would, oh, I didn't know.
They agreed on it because there was all kinds of pressure to do it a bagel or a Star of David. It was just.
I didn't know that. So in any event, So I want to ask, when we look at these sources, I want to keep asking the question, my Hanukkah, what's Hanukkah? And we can watch, you can decide whether you want to view it as an historical progression or rather different people's way of accessing the holiday. It happens to go in historical order, but honestly, I think that's in some ways more coincidental than really descriptive of each era. So let's say our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kichanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So I'm going to assume a few things from this class, right? We are not an Intro to Judaism class. So we all know that there's no mention of Hanukkah in the Bible. We all know that there's a lot of problems with the Hanukkah story, that in some ways it's more of a civil war than really a fight against the Greeks. There's a whole assimilationist issue that comes in, and there's also historical problems with the story itself, meaning within a few generations, the court itself, the Maccabean court, the Hasmoneans become Hellenized and then end up inviting the Romans in. So I'm going to leave all that to the side for now. Okay.
I didn't know that last thing.
You didn't know the last thing?
Oh, yeah, to intervene in a civil war.
Yeah, two brothers, two Maccabean Hasmonean brothers got into a fight over who would be king, and one of them invited in the Romans. And the Romans aren't good at leaving.
But they're good at destroying temples.
Well, I mean, again, this is of course way before the destruction of the temple, right? The Romans come in before that, and then that history begins. Okay, that's how the Romans get there. All right, so if you look at Maccabees, so here's first of all just an interesting question when we ask the My Hanukkah question. There is this book called Maccabees, which none of us studied in religious school. You did?
In the Christian Bible.
Bibles did.
No, very good. Okay, so in this instance, actually, your religious education has the potential to be broader because Catholics view the book of Maccabees as holy writ, and Jews don't. Right? We identify it as a how would you translate Sefer Chitzonim? Apocrypha.
Yeah, apocryphal.
But apocrypha meaning, right? What apocrypha means is it's outside the canon. But it exists. I mean, in other words, there's no point pretending like it doesn't exist. So this is how, and 1 and 2 Maccabees are the older books. 3 and 4 are probably later and are more looking at and reinterpreting historically. 1 and 2 are a little closer to the events. So here's a description of the end of the story. And so again, the question I want to ask is my Hanukkah. Judah Maccabee and his followers, under the leadership of God, recaptured the temple in the city of Jerusalem. They tore down the altars which the foreigners had set up in the marketplace and destroyed the other places of worship that had been built. They purified the temple and built a new altar. Then, with new fire started by striking flint, they offered sacrifice for the first time in 2 years, burned incense, lighted the lamps, and set out the sacred loaves. After they had done all this, they lay face down on the ground and prayed that God would never again let such disasters strike them. They begged God's mercy when they were punished for future sins and not hand them over anymore to barbaric pagan Gentiles. They rededicated the temple on the 25th day of the month of Kislev, the same day of the same month on which the temple had been desecrated by the Gentiles. The happy celebration lasted 8 days, like the festival of Sukkot, and people remembered how only a short time before they had spent the festival of Sukkot wandering like wild animals in the mountains and living in caves. But now, carrying green palm branches and sticks decorated with ivy, they paraded around singing grateful praises to the one who had brought about the purification of God's holy place. And if you'll forgive an irresistible author or editorial comment, for the one and only time in Jewish history, everyone agreed that the entire Jewish nation should celebrate this festival each year. Okay, this is the way the book of Maccabees describes not all the historic events, but the origin of the festival of Hanukkah. So according to this,
second to last time, right?
Sorry?
Purim was the last time, wasn't it?
Purim was the last.
Was the last time that everybody agreed to
No.
the
It
entire
says,
Jewish nation?
No, towards the end of the Megillah, it says most everybody agreed.
Oh, you're right. Okay, I'm sorry. Go on. Carry on. Thank you for
We're
explaining
not
to me.
good at agreeing on things.
Yeah.
Agree when we agreed.
We can't even agree when we agreed, correct? Well, no, but at the end, they agreed to accept my view on it. Okay, so, right, I notice this every year, by the way, when they vote on the budget and the board always has there's 5 or 6 people who just on principle always vote against the budget. And there's 11 people or 10, 11 people who always vote against the board. It's just I don't know why. It's anyway, it cracks me up. Okay, So for them, my Hanukkah, what's the purpose of Hanukkah for this book of Maccabees?
Oh, you're asking us.
I am. I'm posing a real question.
It's there in the text.
Well, so tell me.
It says that we're going to remember this every year. It's hard for me to read from this distance, but he says about.
But what are we going to, but again, what's the thing we're remembering, right? Notice
I see.
they're making some choices here about what they're
Oh,
emphasizing.
we're remembering that God handed us over to pagans because we pissed God off. And part of the celebration is a face down prayer that God will never do that again. That really jumped out at me this
Yeah,
year.
that's a good point.
Great.
Yeah.
It's very temple centered, right? This is very much, we're going to re-centralize Judaism here. Notice we're getting rid of pagan worship, right? This gets back to, I almost did it yesterday at our Hanukkah gathering. It's so tempting to say the Maccabees fought for religious freedom, but that's Nourishkeit. Okay, pagans are perfectly happy to grant religious freedom. Polytheists have no problem with it. It's monotheists who have a problem. So notice we tore down their altars. And they identify them as foreigners, which is also an editorial choice. Yeah. There may well have been Jews doing that as well. But in other words, we got rid of their stuff and we purified our temple. And then we get this Deuteronomistic element, right? Don't punish us for future sins and hand us over more to barbaric pagan Gentiles.
So I felt a little a reverberation of Noah there.
That's interesting.
The goal in the sky, God will never do this again. And what they're saying is, we'd like another deal like that. We'd like another deal that you're never going to do this again.
Great. So they want to identify it was so bad this time, don't do this to us again. Now, of course, this is part of the reason. There are many reasons the book of Maccabees is not canonized. The main one is nothing that's perceived of as being written after the Persian era gets canonized. So it's actually a larger brush about what they think of the Hellenistic era. But this book is problematic from a later perspective because, of course, the hopes of it are not fulfilled in any way. Right? This doesn't happen. Okay, so it's very much about it celebrates the military victory, but it's really centered on the temple and on not being punished for sins in the future, right? It's recognizing and acknowledging the kind of Deuteronomy philosophy of you sin and you're punished. Okay? All right, now, of course, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the thing about the festival, it almost makes me wonder if they're looking for a way to fill the gap between Sukkot and Pesach. Like, that's a long time to be away from the temple. And if they want to keep people kind of present, and, don't forget that we own this place, or I don't know, it just feels like on another festival. We have a lot of them.
Right.
There was probably a pre-existing winter festival of lights because like everybody in the world has that, and this was a way of attaching it to the temple.
Yeah. So question I would love is, so it says 25th of Kislev, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we all know that there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that Jesus was born in the winter. There's no, as a matter of fact, there's evidence that he wouldn't have been.
Okay.
So is it possible that the Christians saw this and took that 25th, that the 25th of December comes from us, from the 25th of Kislev?
Look, it seems to me, it is possible, but it seems more likely to me that they're both reflecting older pagan customs of the winter solstice holiday.
But that's that 20, because the winter solstice isn't always on the 25th of Kislev.
Right, but if you're doing a solar lunar calendar, it's sort of close enough. So like we know that there were Saturnalia on the 25th, like that's my guess.
Fair enough.
Doesn't the Talmud have another date that they talk about it being during Sukkot, not actually being on the 25th of Kislev?
Yes, the Talmud doesn't follow this dating.
And the other thing I wanted to point out that you said that the book is about, the holiday is about the Hanukkah, but the book is not named Hanukkah. We call it Hanukkah, but they don't call it Hanukkah. They call it Sefer HaMaccabim.
That's right. Sure, absolutely. I'm right. That's absolutely right. I'm just noticing, right, that the focus here, when they talk about the holiday, they're very interested in the military events. The whole books are obviously, you may not know the books. The books are a praise of the Hasmoneans and their military and political and spiritual leadership. But just this passage specifically is talking about, here's the festival we're going to do. And it does echo Purim in that way, right? We declared it now, we're going to do it and celebrate it each year. So, all right, now let's move to.
Do we have a kind of dating for when the book was written?
Yeah. Sefer Maccabee is written around 180. Well, it's written in 2 or 3 stages. So the earliest material is probably like 170 BCE. And the latest material is maybe 80 or 90 years later. So this source, I believe most of us have studied before. So if I'm wrong, just someone correct me. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. This is the mention of Hanukkah in the Talmud. Okay, I've asked you this question before, some of you. So let me just reiterate, by the way. There are 127 folio pages about Shabbat. There are 40 pages about the festival of Purim. There are 70 some odd pages about Yom Kippur. I can go on like this for a while, but I won't. How many pages in the Talmud are dedicated to Hanukkah?
We are looking at them.
2. Okay, there are 2 folio pages. So the first thing I would identify is that to me means the rabbis are uncomfortable with the holiday. Okay, I just want to say it seems like a very small amount of material and that there's something going on here with some tension around what they think of the holiday. And this is the only thing they tell you about the meaning of Hanukkah. And it's not the origin of the miracle of the oil. That actually occurs in 4 Maccabees, which is one of the reasons we think it's a later book. But this is the only mention of the events of Hanukkah. So it goes like this. My Hanukkah, de Tanu Rabbanan, the Kafe Bekislev Yomei de Hanukkah. On the 25th day of Kislev, the days of Hanukkah, they are 8. We should neither eulogize them nor fast on them. So this is punctuated badly, by the way. So Hanukkah comes up in a list elsewhere of a Baraita that's talking about what are all the days that you're not allowed to mourn on. And it just happens to come up in that list. So then as long as they're there, like, okay, so what the heck is it? I mean, think of what a shocking question this is for the Gemara to ask, right? You're talking about a 2nd century text, 400 years we've been celebrating Hanukkah, and they're like, what the heck is it? They don't ask, what's the Shema? They just assume you know it. They don't ask you what Yom Kippur, right? There's a million things they assume you know, and they ask you what's Hanukkah. So they say when the Greeks entered the temple, they polluted all the oils in the temple. And when the Hasmonean dynasty overcame and defeated them, they checked and they found but 1 cruse of oil that was set in place with the seal of the high priest. But there was in it only enough to light a single day. A miracle was done with it, and they lit from it for 8 days. The following year, the sages fixed those days, making them holidays for praise and thanksgiving. So according to the Talmud, my Hanukkah. What is Hanukkah for the Talmud?
The miracle of the oil.
It's all about the miracle, and it's also rooted in purity and impurity, right? Do you know how complicated I find it to explain the miracle of the oil to people? There's all these little, like, nobody really understands what's the deal. Why couldn't they just like get some olive oil, right? Like, were they totally, like, people think they were like totally out of olive oil.
Seals have been broken on the.
Exactly, but in other words, you have to explain purity and impurity stuff, that they needed pure oil. I mean, there's a few steps to make this make sense to
Could
anybody.
only get it from the App Store. That they could not.
Yes, I've heard that. Yes, you're right, Nina. That's a good crack, right?
This one.
Oh, if the miracle of Hanukkah is like if you had 15% battery left and it lasted for 8 days.
You know what? There is this cool bilingual pun there about the rabbis fixed Hanukkah. They changed the story to make it acceptable. They fixed it. Before that, the story was broken.
So it's actually almost the opposite of the previous story in the following sense, right? It's what's important to them is they're looking for the cruse of oil that has the seal of the high priest from the previous time before there was any of these problems. So what they're saying is they don't want to rededicate, they want to continue the old tradition. And in the previous one, they cleaned everything up and they then established their own holiday, their new holiday. So Hanukkah is a rename, a funny name because they're dedicating something, but they're actually to dedicate it, they actually have to find a cruse of oil that came from the previous dedication.
Interesting.
And it's actually interesting that they all of the sudden liked the high priest, because in reality at that time they were really fighting with the high priest. The Perizzites were really fighting Pharishites, whatever the pronunciation is.
Yeah.
But they were fighting with them at the time. All of the sudden he is the source of purity.
Right. Right. So I think that's right. I mean, we see, I definitely think the Talmud has in part a nostalgic quality, meaning it keeps yearning for restored sovereign Israel again. And part of what that means is, right, they want to find the last cruise of oil and then restart everything. Absolutely. And notice it also, there's no mention of sin here. There's no mention of the Deuteronomy theology, right? That's absent. And
No
it makes
exile.
no exile, and it makes them days of praise and thanksgiving, which is not mentioned in the previous text. Now, we give this a liturgical meaning, right? We actually say Hallel, but the intention of the rabbis seems to be, right, they should be days of gratitude and thanksgiving.
Mhm.
You can see, by the way, why I like it better when Hanukkah, so even though Hanukkah and Christmas date from a common pagan origin about the solstice festival, the way that Hanukkah evolved is it became a festival of Thanksgiving, and it's a kind of make-up Sukkot. So in the same way, Thanksgiving is also based on Sukkot in some ways. In other words, some of the early practitioners of Thanksgiving were thinking about Sukkot. So they more naturally, in the way that at least we experience both of them, they more naturally line up. Okay, I'm going to skip the material about the Chanukiah, because again, we've done that before, and that's, I would say, it's fascinating, but it's more intro to Judaism stuff. And let's move on to this. So this is the song that we read in Hanukkah. This is the little piyut that we attach to the grace after meals and to the Amidah. So let me just identify for you. That means if you are a observant Jew who davens 3 times a day and who says Birkat Hamazon at least once, if not twice a day, okay, you are saying this at least 4 to 6 times a day during Hanukkah, every single day of Hanukkah. Right? So, I mean, you are repeating this, and to be totally honest, I have been repeating it repeatedly, and I'm kind of bored of it. And I have times where I just like say the Al Hanisim part and then like think my own Hanukkah thoughts, because it's incredible. Like they're hammering our head. I mean, it comes up a lot. Okay. So we start with, we praise you for the miracles and redemption and for the mighty deeds and for the victories and for the battles you performed for our ancestors in those days at this time. I picked this up off of Safaria, and I didn't clean up the gender language. In the days of Matityahu, and that intro we use, you can have I joke, you can have a Sufganiya. I don't really have one, whatever, and you're not here anyway. I'll give you a Sufganiya if you can tell me what are the other 2 occasions where we say this intro.
Purim and Yom HaAtzmaut.
Good. One is Purim, and then the other one in the conservative movement, at least, is Israeli Independence Day. And then we tell the story. So in the days of Matityahu, the son of Yochanan the high priest, the Hasmoneans and his son, when the wicked kingdom of Greece rose up against your people Israel to make them forget your Torah and to stray from the laws of your will, you with great mercy stood by them in the time of their distress. You fought their fight, judged their cause, and avenged them with vengeance. You delivered the strong into the hands of the weak, the many into the hands of the few, the impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the righteous, and the arrogant into the hands of those engaged with your Torah. For yourself, you made a great and holy name in your world. You performed a great deliverance for your people Israel on this day. After these things, your children entered into the Holy of Holies of your house, cleansed your temple, purified the places of your holiness, kindled lights in your holy courts, and established these 8 days of Hanukkah to express thanksgiving and praise to your great name. So what about this one, my Hanukkah?
First, so obviously this follow Maccabean more than the Talmud, but the first problem I have is son of the high priest, really?
Yeah.
Yes, the ahistoricism here is remarkable. It's clear from the Maccabee account, which this partly relies on, that Matityahu was a rural Kohen, and part of what triggers the whole story is that he wasn't related to the high priest.
When was this introduced into the liturgy? You know?
It's Middle Ages. It's hard to date exactly. It's like it's in what's it called? Seder Ashkenaz from like the 11th century. So it's sometime around 11th, 12th century.
And it's trying to cover all the bets here.
It's covering a lot of bets.
It's trying to cover everything. So everybody can leave this prayer happy.
But yeah, but notice, okay, first of all, right? The wicked kingdom of Greece rose up against Israel. The causality here, to make them forget your Torah and stray from the laws of your will. Okay, and the Maccabees, whose fault was that? That was our fault,
Mhm.
right? We brought it on ourselves. We sinned, and that man, God empowered the Greeks to mess with us. This is the other way around.
I chuckled every time we read that yesterday.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's like the only, frankly, Jews are so good about taking responsibility and over blaming ourselves. I think this is the only liturgy I know of in the Jewish tradition where we actually say it's not our fault.
We
So it's
better
remarkable.
make it-
Just like Wilson.
And then it says, wait, who fought, by the way? It's God who
God
fought.
fought.
Yeah. This outstretched, you almost have the outstretched arm here.
Right. You minimize, Matityahu, you really emphasize him as high
It was
priest.
more like
rather
the Yetziat Mitzrayim, right?
Mhm.
Yep. And you totally ignore Judah, right? The military hero of the story is erased. And it's God who does the fighting.
You once said that maybe the reason that the rabbis pushed us to think about the miracle less than victory was that during the Talmudic period and for a long time afterwards, they don't want any of the authorities getting the idea that they were stirring people up.
Yeah.
And that this is sort of almost like a messianic thing. We're going to wait for God to take care of it again. God took care of it before, but wait for him to take care of it again. We are no threat.
Yeah. I mean,
This-
this is right. I agree. I mean, so the Talmud, I think, is worried about hotheads in Persia taking up arms, which is less of a concern in the Middle Ages, meaning there's still a risk of it, but they just are so out of power. So I think this is around when the Crusades are brewing and things are really turning bad. And so this is having the Jewish people say, not we're going to save ourselves from this, but there was a time where you stood up for us with great power, and we kind of like it again. Thank you.
So
The same
Yeah,
era
but it
Mao
goes- it
Tzu
goes-
was written, yeah. Right, because Mao Tzu was written, please save us from the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. I mean,
Exactly.
that's the punchline.
Right.
But this goes both ways as well. If God is saving us, then the old world notion that, oh, you God is no match to our God because he has forsaken you, sorry for using that term, then this goes both ways.
Well, right. I think there's an element, though, that this is a response to that in the Christian world, right? In other words, this is written in Christian Europe, and the Jews are sort of saying back to the Christians, it's not that our God has abandoned us. We have numerous examples of God stepping up and beating the crap out of everyone, and we don't know why God's waiting or what the delay is here, but God's going to do it.
if you tie this as a response to the Crusades,
Yeah.
then there are ways of viewing the Crusades in which they were, on a percentage basis, they were more horrific than the Holocaust.
Yes.
And so if you're talking about the people that are experiencing Holocaust-like genocide, and then to say, then there had to be people asking, just like in the 40s, where was God?
Yeah.
So where is that literature? Where are those voices reacting to this, saying, where is God?
So you see there is other literature. It mostly comes out around the Binding of Isaac. There's a lot of commentary on the Binding of Isaac around this era, including things that imagine where Abraham really slaughters him. And it's clear that they're thinking of their own experiences of having killed their children to prevent them from being murdered and raped. So you see that, but look, okay, this is a Hanukkah liturgy, right? It does have to be celebratory at the end of the day, but it is also
Yeah,
somewhat a
I have an
response to
appointment
despair.
At 1:30 with Mariko Blakemore on December 7th.
As interesting as Alan's medical history is to all of us, I'm going to mute that. So, all right. So it comes back to the Holy of Holies here, but really in this one, it's emphasizing the political, historical more than the Talmudic one does, but with God as the energy and motivator rather than humans. Okay, so now just a little one. This is a little bit tangential, but I couldn't resist it because partly Carol and I have a tune to it, which I really love, but I've just been into it this year. And so I included it. You may know this one, right? Hanerot Halalu. We have this very weird kavanah that we say over the candles, which seems to give us the halachic and does answer the question a little bit of my Hanukkah. It says, we kindle these lights on account of the miracles, the deliverances, and the wonders, which thou didst work for our ancestors by means of your holy priests. During all the 8 days of Hanukkah, these lights are sacred. Neither is it permitted us to make any profane use of them, but we are only to look at them in order that we may give thanks unto your name for your miracles, your deliverances, and your wonders. So this one is a little different also, right? Like for this text, my Hanukkah.
It's kind of vague what those miracles and wonders are.
Oh, yeah, right? And in some ways, the broadness of it does invite a little bit like everything, right? It means give thanks not just for the it doesn't mean the political miracles of Hanukkah anymore. It's like, thank you, God, that I breathe in the morning. Thank you for the new day. I mean, there's a broadness here in this one. No?
When was it written?
Again, this is the earliest reference. So this is Cedar Ashkenaz, 11th century.
Okay,
It's old.
because in post 1948 Jew, when he thinks of deliverance, he thinks of the establishment of the state of Israel.
For sure.
We're thanking God for that.
No, this is way, way, way before that.
There's also this whole thing about the lights being holy and that not being allowed to use them, which is actually that's actually kind of a strange quality of the Hanukkah candles, right?
Right. Yeah, Dina.
Shabbat candles have that.
No, they don't actually.
No,
You can do
My
that.
candles are supposed to be used.
I thought, oh, okay.
Give
My
light
mistake.
to the house so it'll be joyful
So you can
and so
touch
you
them.
can study Torah. And Hanukkah candles, you need the shamas. So if you're using any light, it's from the shamas and not from the other candles.
which is obviously a joke. It's outnumbered
Right.
8 to 1. So
Such a Jewish concept.
And the concept, and the shamas has a way of melting down first unless you use a bigger candle for the shamas.
But it's the holiness of the lights, right? So that the idea that the lights are holy, therefore we can't use them, that we only get to look at them and wonder about the miracles. That's a very strange. It's kind of a strange characteristic, right?
there is another element here that has not been brought up yet. The structure of the menorah itself and whether it should or should not resemble the original one that was in the temple.
A dinosaur, I think. That's our favorite one.
Right. And of course, the temple one is a 7-pointed rather than the 9-pointed of Hanukkah,
Yeah.
right? Which is
But-
that's the symbol of Israel.
But the design also,
Yeah.
I think, needs to be different, right?
Well,
There's all different designs.
as
Doesn't
long as
ha-
they're
I
on
don't
the
think
same level, Uri, I think the only halacha is that for a kosher one, they all have to be on the same level.
Yeah.
What I'm missing here, and which is a big deal in our family, is the beacon out to the world. See, I've not seen.
Yeah.
We're showing them that
Mm.
look, this is what we're showing the world, not just
That's right.
ourselves, but the
True. It
Gentiles. I
It doesn't say
listen-
anything about showing them to other people because which
Yeah.
putting them in the window or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. And
I mean,
Talmud,
just to be fair, like I did skip that section of the Talmud, right? The Talmud definitely says that.
okay.
So the
I
Talmud,
read it somewhere.
yeah, no, the Talmud definitely says, but you're right. It's an interesting omission, both in the thing here in Cedar Ashkenaz about this thing we say about the Hanukkah story, and then the Kavanah over the candles. We don't mention anything externally facing, right? This is totally internal.
Yeah.
And again, the two sources vary a little bit. I mean, they may have been written at similar times. Even their earliest source is both Cedar Ashkenaz. So they're a little earlier than that, right? So it's 11th, 12th century, somewhere in there. But the second one, the one about the candles, seems to me a little bit more pure faith. We notice and we worship God and we have thanksgiving to God and gratitude, period. Whereas the other one is like God in history and God will redeem us. And like there's a more political dimension to the experience of faith than in the second one. So again, just different concepts of my Hanukkah. So now you can, I know some of you know me well enough that it would be hard for me to resist a little bit Sfat Emet on this. So we're jumping forward several hundred years now. The Sfat Emet, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Alter Ger, or Ger, was a key Hasidic figure who, among other things, wrote a book called the Sfat Emet. And I'm a big fan of it. I spent a couple of years studying it, and it's a wonderful book that's very rooted in Jewish mysticism and often has what I find to be incredibly provocative insights. And what he does is, in addition to his commentary on the Parsha, the Sfat Emet is a Parsha by Parsha commentary. It's like sermons basically that he gave. There'll be like a collection of like 12 sermons on a particular Parsha. So it's sort of a collection of his writings over a period of time. And then he'll also have selections about holidays. So this is from his material about Hanukkah. And as you can imagine, for him, my Hanukkah goes in a very different direction. It's written, a lamp of the Lord is the soul of man, searching out all the belly's chambers. So this is from Proverbs, right? So Ner Adonai Nishmat Adam, right? The candle of God is the soul of a person. So the Gemara notes that searching requires a candle. One candle from another, I will seek out Jerusalem with candles. So these are the two verses on which he's going to base his commentary. So the sanctuary and the temple are found in every one of Israel, meaning every single Jewish person. As scripture says, I will dwell within them, right? And keep in mind, that's our verse, meaning, Dina, you may not know this actually, we have a large, on our dedication material outside of this building, in our courtyard, there's a verse there from Exodus, which is, build me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. So that's kind of we mean to make that verse kind of our mission statement as a congregation. So these are present, and so he's noticing the oddity of the verse, right? God says, build me a sanctuary, a singular, that I may dwell in them, plural. So there's all these drashes on this. What does it mean, them? And I think it's a good shot even. It means, build me this place so that I can dwell in you, the people, right? So these are present insofar as a person makes it clear to himself that all life energy comes from the soul. Thus we say each day, the soul you place within me is pure. This means that there is a certain pure place within each Jew, but it is indeed deeply hidden. So in other words, every one of us has a location, a life energy point that's at our sort of deepest level of consciousness or self. And it can be more or less accessible. Yeah.
I hear the author saying that this is just Jews. Only Jews have this inside of them, which is not the way I've ever interpreted this. I've interpreted this that all humanity has this inside of them, and that we can seek it out in all people and be compassionate as a result.
You're right, and especially since we're talking about Hanukkah, we shouldn't avoid it. I was kind of meaning to skate past that. No. I mean, here's the issue. So Jewish mysticism, for sure, is very bigoted towards non-Jews, meaning the Zohar believes, I think, that Jewish souls are more elevated than non-Jewish souls. And Chassidut takes this a step further, that there's Jews who have the neshama, and then there's the rest of humanity that doesn't.
Rabbi Yehuda Halevi as well.
Yehuda Halevi is a little more ambiguous on the point, but yes.
So that's what he's saying. Okay, good enough.
Yeah, so yes, he doesn't think that non-Jews have that. On this matter, I just disagree with him. When the temple was standing, it was clear that all life energy came from God. This is the meaning of the verse. The indwelling of the Shekhinah in the temple was witness that God dwells in Israel. So in other words, something about the existence of the temple itself made that awareness or that depth of consciousness much more accessible than it has become after its destruction. But even now, after the dwelling place has been hidden, right? Notice that. The temple's been destroyed, but the Shekhinah, the dwelling place, has been hidden. It can be found by searching with candles. The candles are the mitzvot. We need to seek within our hearts and souls in order to fulfill a mitzvah with all our strength. So the mitzvot actually are tools that help illuminate our efforts of consciousness to try to dwell into that holiest, most pure aspect of the self. The word ner stands for nefesh ruach, soul and spirit, right? These two elements of the lower parts of consciousness before you get to neshama. To fulfill a mitzvah, yeah?
Those letters in Hebrew, he means, nun and resh.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, right, nun is nefesh, resh is ruach. So, and ruach meaning the animating energy of the body, right? The breath of life, literally. To fulfill a mitzvah in this way, we also make use of all our 248 limbs. These combined with love and fear. So in other words, if you take the 248 limbs plus the two words yira va'ahava, right, love and fear, that adds up to the equivalent of the word ner, which is 250.
Tell me about those 248 limbs. Are we counting bones?
The rabbis believe that there are 248 parts of the body.
Just parts of the body. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
including bones.
And
And
it also stands for the aseh, lo taseh. So
Correct. Right, then they
It's
break it
one
down.
of those many lists that you can't really make work when you try, so just accept it.
But in other words, Nun, right, Resh is 200, Nun is 50, so he can do this little bit of gematria here and line them up. So this is an embodied Judaism, right? In other words, one of the things that the candles of Hanukkah are meant to illuminate is the need for our bodies to become purified, that the physical effort is one of the ways that we access that deep inner place. It's not a purely cognitive or spiritual endeavor. We need our bodies to do it.
And that partition into three is your whole soul, your with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might.
Yes, sir.
It's the same partition.
Absolutely right. Very lovely.
So when
So
we
that-
actually search, the time of the year when we actually search with candles, we're actually looking for chametz. So
Yeah,
it's
isn't
almost
that-
the opposite of this, right?
Yeah. Right. Yes. Yeah. Then we are ready to find the sanctuary to come to the hidden point within. Right. So we need first the mitzvot, the candles, the physical behavior is how we create a readiness to accept the divine. And I guess, part of what's going on, Jeff, is that at Pesach, it is reverse, right? Because we're getting ready for that redemption. And so
Mhm,
it's again,
mhm.
but we're again lighting the candles to show the way. Especially at this
Mhm.
season, when lights were miraculously lit for Israel, even though they did not have enough oil, there remains light even now to help us. So look at how lovely this is. I mean, again, I'm really in love with Sfat Emet. We might think the miracle of Hanukkah never stopped. The oil miracle is meant to talk about a much deeper spiritual miracle, was that you may think there's no way to do it anymore, that we're too separated from God, or God doesn't work like that in the world, whatever it is that gets in the way of your faith. Forget all that, Nourishkeit. God's still there, and there's enough oil for us to be able to, there's enough like divine energy to help light the way. So there remains light enough even now to help us with the aid of these Hanukkah candles to find that hidden light within. Hiding takes place mainly in the dark. We need the candle's light to seek and to find. So there's nothing wrong, by the way, with the dark. We just need the light to illuminate. We need the tools to reconnect with what's there. Right? When we talk about our shadow side, I use the language sometimes from Peter Pitzla and others that use the sort of light and shadow language of like the sort of the good self and the problematic. But the challenge is really an integration one. It's not like I try to say I have no shadow. I'm always going to have the shadow self. The question is, what is it that's motivating the shadow self? And how can I more fully integrate that in to the whole and holy me? The scripture also says, at that time, I will seek out Jerusalem with candles. This means that even now, Jerusalem and the temple can be found by searching. Right now, obviously, he doesn't mean the literal places. He's talking about something inside. Even when it says she is Zion, none seek her, right? This is Jeremiah's despondency that no one even cares anymore. This means that she requires seeking. It's not that Jeremiah is saying no one can seek her. It means that no one's trying. And if only they would try. This happens by the power of the mitzvot that you do with all your strength. So I think he is, by the way, hearing your reference to the Shema. They arouse the inner life energy, which is the pure point. The Hebrew language is nikudat chayot, the life point. Of this, scripture says, seeking out all the belly's chambers. By the power of inwardness, we can find the hidden light within all our own inner chambers. So notice now, the darkness actually contains the light itself, right? He's changed the metaphor just slightly. It's not just that the mitzvot become candles that we can find it, but actually when we look in those dark places, we will realize that there's been light there all the time. We just couldn't see it or weren't trying. This is the meaning of the verse. A person must always measure himself as though a holy being dwelt within his innards. Of a person who conducts himself in this way, it is written, let them make me a sanctuary and I will dwell within them, truly within them. Right? He's asserting that it's not metaphor. God is really inside each of us. And all we have to do, with whatever scare quotes around the all, is the effort of the mitzvot provides us with the tools or the candles that will illuminate the inner self to be able to do that.
So we're told to be a light unto the nations, but this is the opposite. This is internal. This is all about internal. It's all about internal seeking and going into oneself, finding oneself. There's nothing about sending the light onto the nations here. This is very introverted.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's bad. I'm just saying that's what I'm reading.
No, I hear that. I think you're right. So first of all is, of course, the I don't know, the element that we noticed of this kind of Jewish sort of supremacy piece, which is, again, I'm not going to judge somebody from, the 1860s feeling that way. But that means he's not interested in being an Or L'Goyim,
Yeah.
right? He's not interested in being a light among the nations because it's a fool's errand.
They're not worthy.
They're not, yeah.
Wow.
But it's also interesting, and I hadn't thought of this when I prepared, but because the other post-Talmudic sources, the Talmud's very interested in that Or L'Goyim thing, right? Again, here, let's just look for 1 second, because again, we didn't teach this, but I don't want to totally omit it, because I think it's, just so you see, right? It talks about lighting the candles and whatever. Did I bring the source where it says? I guess I didn't even bring it. I mean, again, I skipped this part this year intentionally because we've studied it in the past, but just to highlight, right? The Talmud, of course, does say you're supposed to put it outside. You're supposed to put it in a public location. You're supposed to have it somewhere where people can see it. And the question that raises, especially when we're studying Bava Batra, is we see consistently in the Talmud that the marketplace is an interfaith meeting location. So if you're putting it outside and they're talking about what do you do in your shop and what if it burns, in other words, they're aware of it as a point of friction between the Jewish and non-Jewish world. So it may be inwardly directed, meaning you want to get Jews to talk about it, but I think it is also outwardly directed in the Talmud. And then there's some kind of evolution that's happening, meaning by the time you get to the Siddur, 11th, 12th century, and by the time you get to Sfat Emet, maybe the experience of the tremendous violence of Christian Europe does cause a turn inward. And we as American Jews now are obsessed, not necessarily in a bad way, but I mean, it's a thing, right? American Jews want to talk about Or L'Goyim, right? That we're a light among the nation. We want to think of our mission. We're very uncomfortable, I think appropriately so, with the bigotry and the supremacist notion. But even more, we're drawn to we have a mission from whatever, if you'll forgive the Blues Brothers, right? We have a mission from God.
The Penguins.
From God.
We have a mission from God.
But there's also in the United States the extreme Zionist position, and that is you're putting them out there to say, I'm a Jew, you want to make something of it.
Well, what's interesting is Israel,
I'm proudly Jewish. Don't tread on me. There's a lot of that as well.
there is a lot of that as well, but Israel, so I think American Judaism tends to, across movements, this is true in the Orthodox as well as the Reform as well, turns outward, meaning on some level you have to justify what this is about that's bigger than just the Jewish community. Israeli Judaism is not so bothered by that question across movements. And that is sometimes an area of friction between American and Israeli Jews. Right? In other words, we American Jews, and Uri, I don't know where you want to put yourself in that regard, but we American Jews are a little uncomfortable with that inward turn and the nationalist element that it raises. And then Israelis, I think, are a little uncomfortable with our outward turn. So this comes up in the tension of Israelis are sometimes like, what is wrong with you people when we're having an attack on Gaza that you're saying anything other than support? Like they're shooting missiles at us. Would you please shut up? And then American Jews saying like, wait, how can you be acting and like what's going on at the wall and like what's wrong with these human rights? It's a different perspective on how we're seeing things. It does create friction. And I'm seeing it in the way that the Hanukkah material is in the Siddur, right? There's a turn inward there. Uri, I don't know if you have a thought on this. I feel like I pitched at you, so then I have to at least give you a shot.
No, I know. It's yeah, when it comes to the missiles and everything, there is. So here is the event from yesterday. I don't know if you read in the news the stabbing next to Shar Shechem yesterday.
I did.
So you know what happened next is like the Department for Investigating Officers immediately engaged to see what these guys, why did they kill him? they should have stopped. I mean, this happens in America. The most frightening thing for me in America is a police officer, because these guys never shoot to stop somebody. They actually shoot to kill. And I have never understood why they are being trained this way. They should not. Somebody is running at you with a knife, shoot at his leg, make him fall, and there it needs to stop. And in Israel,
There's good arguments in the other way. Let's not get into this about shooting to stop.
no, I'm
There are
just
very
telling,
good
I'm just
reasons
talking
to
about
shoot
Israel.
people.
Don't get upset. So in Israel, they investigate them. A person is stabbing somebody else, and those officers are being investigated. How
So
did
wait,
they
I feel
really
like,
kill him?
Uri, I feel like I have to clarify slightly. So I think the problem, and Israelis are wrestling with this today also. I mean, in other words, it's controversial in Israel.
Yeah,
You know, he got knocked down,
right.
and then so he was trying to stab someone, they knocked him down, then they shot him when he was down on the ground.
Right.
And what happened is the Knesset was divided over this. Many
Right.
Chavrei Knesset wrote in praise of the officer, and
Right.
several condemned him.
Right.
And so it's in the Israeli media today, and it will sure hit the American, but the American media, I mean, look, to this point, Uri's right. We will probably react differently to it than the Israeli media does. And I think it
Yeah.
will be less divisive in Israel, which is clear. Only the lefties, by which I mean like some of the Meretz people and the labor people or whatever, are criticizing it. Within the current coalition, Naftali Bennett was quick to tweet his strong support of the officers, which I thought personally, Uri, and this betrays, I view myself as a center-right on Israel politics. And I would probably vote for Yesh Atid if I were in Israel, I think. So I mean, just to like name where I am, just like whatever, my own bias. But I think I would say Naftali Bennett was too quick to approve of
Yeah.
it.
He shouldn't even get involved in this. It's not his business.
Right.
But
Let them
but
investigate and see whether it was appropriate use of force
exactly.
or not. It doesn't
Exactly.
look
But
great on the surface, but there may be more to it.
no, it's a different conversation. We could have it some other time. But really there is a problem over there. Being an officer myself and being in those situations, this absolutely cripples the ability of soldiers to do what they are supposed to do, period. Whether these guys were doing the right thing after he was knocked down, well, there is a claim he was looking to get something. It could have been, a gun or whatever. Nobody knows. I'm not trying to be a judge. I'm just reacting to the different
And
approaches.
I think that exactly highlights the distinction I'm making. I think if one is an Israeli, the first question is, what's the risks being created here? And there's an immediate sense of like, maybe there's something really bad going on and we want to be sure our cops are not hamstrung. I'm not saying that's going to be the second reaction. There's going to be an investigation and we'll find out what happened. It was justified use of force. I do think the American Jewish first reaction on seeing the still images, right, seeing the guy pushed to the ground and someone shooting him, is like, what the heck is that? And something went wrong.
Yeah.
And that's a disagreement.
Yeah, but we have officers who are shooting people in the backs as they're running around and not even risking.
Fair, but I mean, I'm just saying, I saw the image of him lying on the ground, and to be honest, as a congregational rabbi, really my first thought was, oh shit, I don't want to deal with what this is going to bring up.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so let me give you one other source. Okay, this is a contemporary song, right? This is written, I don't know, somebody probably knows the exact dating of this, but this is written by the Zionists.
That's Israel's Anglo version.
So give me a date. That's like 1930?
No. He lived in the 1800s.
Okay. So notice here. You guys know the Birkat Hamazon, right? Mi Yamalel Gvurot Adonai. Who can retell the great things of God? He starts off by rewriting it. Mi Yamalel Gvurot Yisrael.
Oh no, me Yamalel who wrote Israel is around 1900.
Yeah. This is the Zionist, obviously, the secular Zionist retelling the story. Yeah. Right.
So God gets deleted out of the story now, right? Who can retell them? And our translation is also interesting here, right? Otani, now who can count our great things, not God's, but ours? B'chol dor yakum hagibor. So in the Hebrew, it's some kind of hero will arise. Now, partly for scanning purposes, so the tune matches, they wrote a hero or sage,
Oh,
but that doesn't appear in the original version because the secular Zionists who wrote this were not interested in sages, right? They want the Gibor,
That's right.
the new socialist man with excellent biceps, to rise up and protect the Jewish people. That individual will become Goel Ha'am. And
Okay.
precisely not the sages, not those, pasty-faced, weak yeshiva buckers who can't even
Exactly.
climb Matzada.
So but okay, I thought in Hebrew it was Gvurat rather than Gvurot.
It's Gibor. Oh,
No, but I mean,
Gvurot.
the first line, Miyamalel, is it Gvurat or Gvurot?
I remember I learned Purot.
Okay, so,
I learned it in plural as well.
okay, so,
I just grabbed this one because it had the translation. I didn't. Oh, here we go. Miyam Malel Gvurot.
okay, it is Gvurot. Okay, yeah.
You're saying that the English translation has intention behind it as well.
Yeah.
And for me, what jumps out is I'm seeing an English translation of a Hanukkah song, and in the middle of it is hark. And that grates on me when I see it. They could have chosen many other words.
Well,
And someone chose hark, and I think there's a reason for that.
Okay. What do you think is the reason?
I think they're either influenced by Christmas or they're sticking their finger in the eye of Christmas. One of the two.
Hark is Shema.
It seems
It's the word Shema, right? Shema by
Yeah.
Yemim Hark.
listen. How about listen? Anything.
No, it's just a time. It's 19th century, right? It's a 19th century translator.
Okay, this seems too Christmassy adjacent.
All right. So then we go on. Right?
I would say both are right. The Christmas carols were written around in that same era of English.
Listen would be better.
The Seder. So Shema, right? Here, and again, I think there's again a liturgical reference here, right? It's Shema Yisrael.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. That's great.
Okay. Bayamima hem bazman hazeh, right? At these time, that's in that era. Maccabi Moshia Ufodeh. Again, God's totally lead it out. It was the Maccabees who came and saved and redeemed. And to apply the word Moshia to a people, we've talked about this before, right? Goel is less of a stretch. Humans can also goel. We see that repeatedly, right? Humans can redeem. And that verb is used in the Tanakh to apply to people. But Moshia, not so much, right? That's a different process. And it in the Bible is a thing that God does.
It also says Bayamim Mahem Bazman Hazeh, meaning exactly like those days. In our time, we again need to do it the same way.
That's right. Right, because Uveyamenu Kol Am Yisrael, in our time, every Jew, Yitached, let's become one, Yakum Vayigael. We will rise up and be redeemed. To see here, right? Now all Israel must as one arise, redeem itself through deed and sacrifice. That's also not in there, right?
No,
They
it's not
must
there.
redeem themselves, right? We're going to all get together and we're going to redeem the people. And it's fairly clear that this call for unity is a call to go to Israel and be part of the Zionist experiment, which is also elited out of the, right? All Israel must as one arise, redeem itself through deed and sacrifice. I don't know, again, if hark is specifically a call out to Christmas, but it becomes much more palatable to sort of American, late 19th, early 20th century kind of Protestant Judaism.
And when they're saying sacrifice, they're not talking about killing cows. They're talking about action. They're talking about an action. Is what that kind of.
Well,
stuff.
again, I don't know what the English translation means at all because the Hebrew doesn't say
I
sacrifice.
know.
Yeah.
But there's intent behind this translation.
No, for sure. But it's
Okay,
Christian
where
language, right?
is Menashe Rabina?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it was written by Menashe Rabina using a folk tune. Not sure exactly when Menashe Rabina lived, but the Hebrew lyrics are, like
1898, 1899 to 1968.
okay,
Oh,
early
I thought-
20th century.
Went to Palestine in 1924.
Yeah.
Cool.
So this is a 1920s, 30s song that he wrote.
Yeah,
And the English translation is later.
yeah, and lousy. There's no good English translation. They're
But it's
also
what
funky.
people in America
I mean, people
say.
know this. We sing it.
Kids,
So-
kids grew up singing, your parents grew up singing this? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so.
I grew up
You
singing
always
this.
sung it after Mount Sore. Those were
My
the
father
only
grew up singing the
songs.
the English that's right there, and I grew up singing the Hebrew that's right there.
Yeah,
So look, but wait, I want to make this point, okay? So first of all, even in this one song, the question of my Hanukkah is different, right?
Yes.
For Rabiner, the Zionist version, my Hanukkah is, we better build the state of Israel. For the English version, it's a little more vague, but my Hanukkah is something about Jewish unity and redemption, but very parved for a kind of American Protestant context, if you'll excuse my judgment.
Yeah.
So what I want to say is, I feel like the Talmud is actually asking the right question about Hanukkah. When it says my Hanukkah, it's clear to me that that is the thing we have as yet to agree on in any meaningful way. And that there are multiple meanings to Hanukkah in a way that there aren't to Pesach, for example. I mean, I'm not saying Pesach is singular in its meaning, right? But the story is very clear. And in some level, you can start saying with more certainty what it's about. Hanukkah has this fluidity to it. And you know, in some ways, shockingly, of a story that's in some ways ultimately about monotheists trying to wipe out polytheists, we cannot agree on a singular meaning. And there's beautiful stuff in here. And in some ways, each era is drawn to different elements. I really like the Sfat Emet. For me, I find that very deeply meaningful to think about that inner search. I'm not that drawn to the miracle of the oil specifically. I am a little bit drawn to the Israel sovereignty stuff, not the really bloodthirsty pieces, but I mean, I like it that this is a festival that connects to a moment of sovereignty and that having a strong military, I'm drawn, I admit that I'm drawn to that aspect of the holiday, the sort of Jewish nationalist piece. But I just wanted to show with you these different moments and modes that even that two sources in Seder Ashkenaz don't totally agree with each other.
Mhm.
So again, on our more advanced look at Judaism, I'm not trying to give you like, here's what Hanukkah's about. I didn't want to do like the, you know, whatever, Jonathan Sachs, you want to go look for a bunch of his things. They'll give you a couple of good things about what Hanukkah's about. You can feel really inspired. I was trying to do something a little bit more broad of looking at a few different possibilities in the hopes that different things will resonate with us as we have a deeper understanding of the way people have thought of the holiday, and then we can find our own place in it rather than for me to tell you what your place in it should be. That's what I was trying to accomplish today.
Yesh Koach.
And you did, I think. Thank you.
Mission accomplished.
Thank you. So God willing, I will see you all next week. Nina and Charlotta are in conversation, so she will take over when I'm away on sabbatical. She may end up having to skip a few weeks here and there, so I would just told her we would do the usual thing. So if she has weeks she needs to be gone, if you guys can just kind of help her with the subbing piece.
She'll be zooming it. She'll be in Berlin.
She will almost, I saw her yesterday. She's hoping to be in Berlin.
Yeah, she's
I mean,
taking-
as long as she can.
I saw this.
All right. So everybody have a lovely day. Enjoy your last day and a half of Hanukkah. And God willing, I'll see you next week. I'll leave the space open for a few
Thanks very
minutes
much.
if you want. And then I'm going to start the other class. So Anna, we're just ending Talmud and they're going to chat among themselves and they're nice people. So you should feel invited to chat with them as well. I think you know some of them.
Hi, Anna, we've spoken before.
Yeah. Rabbi, could you share the name of the piece of the Zohar that you mentioned last week about language? I didn't quite catch it.
I'll put it in the chat. It's called the Idra Rabbah.
Thank you.
Was this recorded by any chance?
Guatovia.
Yeah, it is. The recording is ongoing, actually.
I was looking in the nli.org.il, so I think it's the National Library of Israel, and I think I saw from 1959 for that piece, which sounds way too late.
For what? For the song?
For Mi Yamalel Kurot
Oh,
Yisrael,
me,
yeah.
Mandel.
It seems too late. May have been a particular arrangement that they were referring to.
I
I
was
think this was
in